Guru Show, and I'm your host, Tyhson Banighen, a permaculture instructor, and we're once again back with the one and only garden guru herself, Sarah Bradshaw. Lots happening on planet Earth, lots happening in the garden at this beautiful sunny day in the Shuswap. It's absolutely glorious with the leaves all turning. But I hear there's something you want to talk about, like Mercury. What's happening with Mercury?
Well, Mercury comes out of retrograde and goes direct today.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, so, if you've been using your Mercury retrograde wisely, and you've been using it to review and redo things and revise and to edit and, kind of remember with Mercury retrograde, the key to everything is those first two letters, re, okay? So you redo, you review, you re-edit, you remember, you recall, you keep focused on the fact that you're not really going to go very fast forward in Mercury retrograde. So use it to, go over those details, make sure you've got it the way you want. Retreat into yourself a bit, give yourself a bit of a respite. But now that Mercury is going to go direct here, we're going to find a lot of things go forward. Well, just like when you've been sitting and spinning your wheels for a while and they finally catch,
Right.
You can kind of lurch out of that situation in a little bit of a chaotic fashion if you don't manage it right.
That's right, burning a little rubber.
Yeah, so a lot of people have been mentioning, that from a physical perspective, vertigo, little bits of dizziness, a feeling like you might have moved a little too fast. In terms of, kind of overall things, it can feel like a bit overwhelming to have all of a sudden all of it moving forward again. And if you've got a busy life and a full agenda, it can get really busy pretty quickly. And then the trying to catch up feeling that we can sometimes be left with can just create some chaos. So, give yourself a couple of days here to settle into the fact that, we are moving forward. Don't let it become a chaos fest, try.
So what time do we go direct? I'll come out of it, I mean.
Actually, we already have that.
Oh, good. Thank goodness.
Yeah, that happened early in the wee small hours of the morning.
Good.
So, and something interesting came up today when I did the daily posting of things, and that is that the moon is going to go full on Wednesday morning, but it's going to go full early in the day Wednesday, like before sunup, pretty much, or right around sunup. And so when people are doing ceremony around full and new moon energies, one of the reasons that an astrological calendar or date book or ephemeris is so important is it gives you the actual time that moon is going to be going full. If you look at a standard calendar and it simply has that the moon is full on the 20th, many people make the assumption that the night of the 20th, when the sun goes down that day, that now we're going to see the moon at its fullest, and not necessarily. Because in this case, it goes full on the 20th, but it goes full early in the morning. So if you're going to be doing full moon ceremony where or new moon ceremony where you're going to be calling in that energy, you're going to be setting that intention for the next phase of the moon, you actually want that to happen while the moon's moving into that energy, not after that energy is passed and is beginning to wane.
Right.
By Wednesday night, the moon's actually going to be starting to diminish. It will be at its fullest Tuesday night. And so I posted a recommendation today when I was talking on my page that people, if they're going to plan their ceremony and that tomorrow night instead of Wednesday would be better timing. And it led to quite a bit of a discussion and let me know that, things that I've learned over the years to just take for granted and automatically grasp are still somewhat of a learning curve for the vast majority of people.
Yeah, I really understand, get that. What we take for granted because we've done it so long is like, what? What you're supposed to do? Who? What? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the mark of the expert, huh? They can make what is really quite difficult and complicated, they can make it look easy.
Right.
Yeah, and you do astrology and biodynamics for 30, 40 years, it starts to feel easy and flow. And that's my hope for other people is that, they
Yeah.
will grasp it and it will be easy and flow. So, we've got some big things going on. Mercury's coming direct. And then the moon today is in Aries and it kind of continues on in right through till Wednesday with being in Aries. So, putting your fruit trees, your fruit bearing shrubs, those kind of things in the ground, still totally possible. We're still in the first half. We're in the second quarter of the moon. So, up until that full moon time, this is still a good window for planting fruit and that on these next few days. And then we slide into right around midday on Wednesday. We've hit the full moon early in the morning, about 7:30 in the morning, and then right around noon we come out of Aries and into Taurus, which is a really solid root sign. And so we're in October, and we're really blessed here because we've still got the weather that's allowing it, but we've got this little one more week of planting energy that we can work with here before things, get into a phase where planting just isn't a good idea. So because Taurus is an earth sign, and governs that, it's a very good planting window, even in this third quarter, which by Wednesday will be into the third quarter. Friday, the sun moves us into Scorpio.
Uh-huh.
So we have a major change there, moving from Sagittarius into Scorpio, and that Scorpio energy is, it's a water energy. It's very fertile. It's going to heighten the fertility of anything that is already in a good planting state. So, Friday afternoon, very, very good time for you to be putting things in the ground before we move into Gemini on Saturday, because Gemini as an air sign, it's not as good for any kind of real universal planting, especially when we're in a third quarter.
Yeah.
You could probably still move perennials because they are blooms, they are flowering plants. So you could probably on the weekend move around your perennials, but prior to that, you're going to want to get any of your rootstock, any of your things like roses and bushes that bear fruit and your fruit trees. So you're going to want to get them in the ground before we run out of time on Friday.
Good. Thanks for the reminder. Get busy out there.
Yeah. So it's a busy week astrologically. We've got planet going direct. We've got the moon entering into going through to the fall and entering that new phase, and then we get the change of sun sign. With the full moon, keep in mind that this is where you see the fullness of this particular cycle. So we could look back to the new moon and we had that little bit of a cold snap, and some people in higher elevations and further north than us lost things to frost, and then we had that lovely little, Indian summer window, and here we are coming up to the full moon. Expect it to get cold after
Mhm.
the full moon. Okay, we're going to be going into the beginning phases of pre-winter.
Oh, goody.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I cherish about here in the interior of BC is that we get four distinct seasons.
Yes, absolutely.
We do. We and each one of them is approximately 3 months in length, and to
Yeah.
me that feels really good. And I remember living in northern Alberta, where in 2008, which is the last year that I lived there. I'd been back and forth for a while, but we had snow on my birthday weekend at the end of May, and it snowed 3 days after my birthday, which put us into June. And that August, my daughter's boyfriend was walking from our house to his mother's home late at night, and he accumulated enough snow off of the top of cars to hit her with a snowball when he came in the door.
Wow.
And my friend Christina summed it up by saying, 9 months of winter and 1 month of spring and 1 month of summer and 1 month of autumn is just not a balance I'm happy with. And I thought, yeah, it's not a balance at all.
Get me out of here.
Yeah. So, here when I say we're getting into almost winter, that's only a couple of weeks, like my experience with certain parts of this planet is, you have almost winter, winter, still winter, more winter.
Yeah.
It's warm, and now it's almost winter again. So when I say we're getting to have almost winter, it's the period here, where it snows and then it rains and then it snows and then it rains.
Right.
And if you're trying to plan something like, a kid's birthday party and you plan a sledding party, you can be guaranteed it will rain. If you are planning a children's party and you figure that, you will actually, go down to the water park, or you will, go down to the waterfront, or then I can guarantee you it will snow. It
Well,
is.
the nice thing about though where we live is we can know that if we go up the mountain, we're guaranteed we're going to have snow for cross country skiing or downhill skiing. So
Absolutely.
that's the beauty of it too. We have these different zones that we can go to, right, to play in.
Absolutely, and we really are blessed. And I actually really like the snow. I'm one of those people who I get excited about that first snowfall. I make hot chocolate and bake cookies and all those things. And by time spring's coming around, I'm quite happy to
Oh,
see it.
I'm more than ready once for spring.
But I at the same time I really cherish that winter time. And when we live more in rhythm with how things should be, in living in harmony with nature, that time can be so important for so many tasks. And me, I get through a lot of the winter sorting and packaging, and and tending the seeds.
Right.
And I know for years and years and years, wintertime was when I made soap, when I made candles, when I did all sorts of things that I just quite simply didn't have time for in the height of summer.
Yeah, and who wants to do that anyway in the middle of summer?
No, not me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, looking forward to this winter for creativity and drawing and some art and things like that. The inner cycle, this is a time where we can reflect and take time to do our journals and to look at, like you said, seed catalogs and get all excited and plan out our garden and what worked and didn't work. And so, I think, if we keep going with the show, and I guess we haven't really talked about that into the winter, then we can talk about some of those things that we can, what you can do winter wise with regard to
yes.
garden.
I have a guest I'm hoping to get on within the next couple of weeks here, who does indoor tower gardening.
Oh, yeah, I do want to know about that.
And she keeps her family in fresh produce the entire winter. And The first time she said that to me, I thought, oh, that can't be right. And then she said things like, well, you only need a couple of tomatoes to make a salad. One cucumber goes a pretty long way,
Yeah.
and I started looking at what she actually grows in her tower garden and went, we got to get you on the show. Like this could work out so many of the bugs for people. And that's such a deterrent so often with people, is that they have no experience, and the learning curve on something like a tower garden can look really expensive. You're buying the equipment, you're buying the actual garden, you're buying the stuff you need to keep it clean, you're buying
A
the
little pump and managing
yeah,
it and
it,
electricity and then
yeah.
oh my god, and you ended up having algae and then you got to deal with algae yeah, so all of that stuff can be, but there's now solutions for all that.
There are, and to have the opportunity to talk to somebody who not only knows about this, and and has a good handle on the equipment and that, but who's actually done it
Right,
successfully for a number of years. Because that's the key, is when you do something over and over and over again, that's when you begin to find out what you really do have to pay attention to, what you can
right,
have shortcuts with,
right,
what the manufacturer says and what actually happens.
right.
And so I'm really looking forward to having her in, and have us really look at that kind of indoor food production. And I've got a few other things that we're going to look at too. I myself do some indoor garden things. It varies from place to place, but you've got the greenhouse at your
Yeah,
place that we can do some winter
yeah,
growing in. um, I think that, helping people understand some of the finer points of growing their own sprouts and microgreens can also be a wonderful way to really amp up your own food production and your available nutrients.
right. And of course, we have food storage too that we can talk about. We can talk about and all the sorts of things you and I have talked about that we haven't done yet about, how do we deal with, dried peas and beans, and how do we then use a pressure cooker, and how
Oh
do
yeah,
we
we have food things and food
all sorts of
preferences
things
that,
to
yeah.
talk about, and how do you store your grain, and what sort of grinders are good, and where do you get it, and yeah, there's lots to talk about, right?
I'm hoping wintertime will give us some more room for some guest speakers on these subjects, because it really is quite fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're right at the tail end, and while we're putting things into the ground, of course, we still have things to come out of the ground, and we've covered a lot of it. But right now, you're coming into freeze up here, and there are things in the garden that are still really delightful to have fresh, and it's a really good idea to get them in if you at all can. Swiss chard, greens, spinach, some of your more cool hardy greens will quite likely to have revived in your garden
Right.
since the heat of summer.
Yeah.
And, keeping your Swiss chard in a jug of water in the fridge will
Yeah.
keep it fresh for a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
and so while you've still got the opportunity before those nightly frosts take it, please go out there and harvest as much of that really nutrient rich green fresh food that you can possibly get
Right.
out of your garden. Many of the herbs that are ready to, they're not going to be much good to you once they freeze, or winter sets in. But herbs freeze beautifully if you freeze them in ice cube trays of water.
Right.
So, now herbs also can be dried, and they're probably amongst the easiest of all
Oh,
things to
yeah.
dry. There's a few exceptions, like parsley and red clover are kind of the ones that spring to mind. That they need to be kind of dried very rapidly, but the vast majority of the herbs that you harvest out of your garden, you can set them out on a paper towel, thinly spread, and let them dry. You can put them in a brown paper bag
Mhm.
and let them dry. You can put them in a wicker basket. Now, keeping them in a wicker basket or a brown paper bag until they're dry is a little preferable because you'll keep dirt and insects off of them
Yeah.
a lot better than just setting them out on a plate to dry. But get those herbs in. They're so potent, and you will bless yourself for taking the few minutes to go off and do that.
Right.
That's your absolute last chance for gathering some of your smaller seeds in the garden. Okay, once your lettuces and then your flower heads actually start by the little bit of moisture
Right.
and the frost. So make sure you get a lot of the seed collecting happening.
Yeah.
Because frost is right around the corner, get anything tender that you haven't gathered, get it in now. Get those tomatoes in, get those peppers in, the eggplants, the last of the cucumbers. Your squash can and do benefit from a little bit of frost touching them. There's an old adage about, you don't bring you don't really put the garden to bed fully and totally until frost is on the pumpkin.
Mhm.
And there's a certain amount of truth to that. So you want to get the last of that fresh harvest in and quite enjoy it. Keep it fresh in your fridge. We're kind of past the peak harvest time for most of your like canning and freezing of your vegetables, but go out on a regular basis and look what's out there. And those of you who grow Brussels sprouts, now's the time.
Mhm.
Okay, if you haven't gathered your Brussels sprouts yet, if you haven't started, you can start now. Now, Brussels sprouts you can keep right on gathering right up to snowfall. They are hardy little monsters, and they do way better in the garden than they're ever going to do in your fridge. So,
Okay.
they're the one thing that you don't have to run out and gather. You
Right.
can the out they will look terrible. You will think that they are rotten, but they probably are not. Dig around in there and you will find that they're really quite tender. The cold actually increases the sugar content in your brassicas. And one of the advantages to planting them either very late in the year or very early in the year is when they're subjected to that cold, you actually get a tastier vegetable.
Yeah. Yummy, yummy, yummy.
Yes, they are. Now, fortunately for the other critters that we share our yard with, people are starting to rethink the putting the garden to bed scenario. But this is definitely time for people to be putting their gardens to bed,
Yeah.
And I grew up in a place and time where it was a huge undertaking. My mom wanted all of those garden beds stripped right down to the soil, absolutely everything removed from the garden, all the tomato cages brought in, all the excess vegetation stripped off of the garden beds and that. But we're getting a little wiser about
Leave it
that.
alone.
Yeah, leave the leaves, okay? Like primarily when you look at your yard and garden, on your lawn, as much as possible, leave the leaves. Now, right now, just prior to the last of those leaves falling, this is a wonderful time to top dress and freshen up any of your grassy areas of your lawn or your grass covered areas that are not doing particularly well.
Hmm.
So
That's
if
my
you,
whole lawn.
yeah, so if you've got little bare patches, if you've got places that, that kind of need a little bit of help,
Yeah.
this is the time to top dress and do that. And if you're going for the non grass lawns, if you're doing clover, or you're doing some of the other plants that are a little less nutrition hungry than grass, this is a really excellent time to get them on the ground. So creeping thyme is one of those things, and as is clover. One of my favorites, British chamomile, is not seedable. You actually have to plant it as starts, and so you can't really fill in with it well at this time of year. But this is definitely the time of year to give that lawn of yours any little extra juice that it's going to need come springtime.
So you say when top dressing, you mean putting seeds in, or you mean fertilizer and seeds?
Top dressing is usually a combination of soil and fertilizer,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
for fall seeding you can add the seeds as well. So yeah, you're doing a combination. It's seldom a good idea to just simply throw fertilizer or seeds on a lawn. Things that lawn seed does much better if you actually premix it with a bit of soil and any kind of supplements that you want along with
Right.
it. Of course, do go organic, and one of the best things that you can put on there to help your lawn get through the winter and come out nice and green in the springtime is bat guano.
Right.
Yeah, it's very good for that. So don't over clean up your yard in getting rid of it. Leave a
Right.
lot of the leaves. Now, there are some things that you do kind of want to get off of your garden beds and those are the things that are likely to cause a lot of mold collection. So, the big long squash vines with their broad leaves,
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
could probably haul them off to the compost pile. I remove my tomato cages most years. I can't say that I'm absolutely diligent about it. Partially just because they last better, and they themselves do better if I take them off the garden and put them in. But I've quit pulling up my tomato plants and taking them off the garden unless I'm actually in a situation where we're going to dig them up by the roots for root cellaring. But if I'm going to harvest on of them in the garden, I tend to leave them, partly because they're very high in nitrogen. They really do have a
Mm.
lot of nutrient in them, and they, being a member of the nightshade family, they are not particularly prone to the same kind of molds that we
No.
get squash leaves and some of the other stuff. They're not particularly prone to developing mold. And they also are not difficult to deal with in the springtime. The tomato plants mostly break down, and you end up with long fibrous strands left on the garden, but they're not difficult to deal with. Most of them have broken right down. By leaving like all that vegetation and that on your garden, you're providing habitat
Mm.
for a whole broad range of insects, including a lot of our really important pollinators. A couple of years ago, somebody pointed out to me that when they first started driving, if they drove from Salmon Arm to Kamloops and back, they generally had to stop and clean their windshield of dead bugs somewhere around Chase in both directions and continue the journey. That the windshield wipers were not quite up to the entire task, and they had
Right.
to give it a wipe. And now they could drive all the way to Vancouver and back and not get enough bugs on the windshield for it to be worrying. That's a big difference.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing.
It really is. And often as humans, in our hubris with our size and our intelligence and our very obvious presence on the planet, we underestimate the importance of things that are microscopic and between microscopic and barely visible to us.
Right.
And insects are, we don't cherish them enough. We make jokes about, burn the house down if you see this spider, or, like, don't go anywhere without your can of Raid, that all ants deserve to die. And the reality is that we have very, very little comprehension of how important all of those insects are. We busied ourselves getting an understanding of the ones that matter to us, like, honeybees. We will worry about honeybees if people pointed out to us, but we overlook the fact that there are over 300 species of wild bees on the North American continent, and that they do, in all honesty, far more pollinating than the honeybees do. That the honeybees are a very limited representation of the bee and pollinator population of the planet. So, if you like those beautiful big atlas moths that come out at night, you can't be raking up the leaves. If you want a healthy population of praying mantises in your garden, you can't be clearing out all the dead leaves and debris from all of your plants and trees in the fall. The eggs need the habitat, the young need the habitat to hatch into. It's a vital importance to everybody that we create habitat, not just for ourselves, but for the other creatures that inhabit our garden. So it's a good idea to do a lot of putting garden to bed, but not nearly as much cleanup as
Right.
we used to do. So what putting a garden to bed looks more like now is a lot more covering up and tucking things in, as opposed to ripping things off and clearing things up. Um, One of the tricks that I learned about keeping fragile grasses and that in really good shape over the winter is, instead of making them completely bare and clearing them of leaves, is to actually conscientiously cover them. We used to take evergreen branches and put them over top of golf greens and the golf tee box at this time of year. And what this does is, it means when the snow lands on it, you've got this zone between the snow and the actual grass that allows the snow to melt slowly and that moisture to melt into the grass very, very slowly. And what this actually prevents and helps not happen is the mold problems that you so often
Right.
see on lawns in the springtime. There's a snow mold that just absolutely thrives at the temperatures of between -2 and +2. And so if you have snow on grass melting and it holds it at that temperature for a very long time, that mold can completely wipe out your more fragile lawn grasses, whereas putting cedar is fabulous for it, by the way. Or another thing that we've actually used is putting snow fencing itself down,
Oh,
like
yeah.
just lay it down off those slats of wood. Again, it keeps the snow up off of direct contact with your grass, and it allows it to melt at a pretty normal rate in the springtime, and the moisture soak right into the ground. Um, any of your more fragile trees would benefit with a really good solid mulching in around the base of your trees. Also, don't forget to water your trees in. Now, this is really, really important with new trees that you've planted this fall. Like they, of all your trees, will need the most attention and the most amount of watering in proportionately. But all of your trees, even your evergreens, will really benefit from you taking a couple of days of just thoroughly, thoroughly, thoroughly soaking the ground around them and letting them go into the winter with an amazing amount of water retained in their roots. It has the most benefit. It is the best thing you can do for your trees. Of all the things that you can do, the cost
Yeah.
and the labor investment in doing this is minimal compared to the result that you get at the end of it.
Would that be the same for the grapes? I just finally got my grapes in. Would they need to be really, really watered?
Yes,
Yeah.
water those grapes in really well.
Okay.
You know, and you will get a much better. They will have a reservoir to go into.
Right.
Go into the spring and early summer with it that just really can't be beat, you know.
Right.
So now anything that you're going to be growing over the winter as a biennial for it to grow and seed out for you next year, you're going to have to mulch that. You're going to have to keep that covered and make sure that it's not going to be exposed and subjected to frost. Now, if you have underground rodents, you're going to have a hard time. Okay.
We have underground rodents.
Yeah. But if you're going to have to just keep like your above ground rodents, primarily your mice and all the varieties of mice, putting down a layer of um, mesh wire, chicken wire, especially if you overlap it, will work okay, or you can get a finer mesh wire. Putting that directly over your plants and then mulching on top of that will prevent the mice from coming in and eating the tops off of your carrots and your parsnips and your turnips that you were growing over winter. So also, if you have carrots that didn't do particularly well, and we've got the one bed in your garden where the carrots were rather thickly planted and didn't develop as well. Well, those kind of places, you can thin those out and tuck them in over the winter, and next year they will grow and you will be able to harvest them early in the summer if you wish to eat them as carrots or turnips or parsnips. If you let them go for very long, they do start to go to seed and the roots get woody, but primarily in the spring, they're fabulous.
Yeah, they're actually sweeter, aren't they?
Oh, they are. They so are. I remember when Wintergreen Farms was where Mayfair Farms is now, and they did horse gardening at that time. And in the springtime, they would go out with their single blade plow and run a row just down the one side of the first row of carrots. And the carrots would literally, you could pull them sideways out of the ground and they would be about this long and they would be just so sweet and fabulous, you know. So, you know, this is a good thing to keep in mind, that if you've got biennial crops that you're wanting to overwinter, cover the top of them with something that is kind of mouse proof so nothing can eat at them from the top, and cover them really, really well. For the sake of seed production and that, you know, your underground rodents, if they leave you the top, those actually will grow out to seed, you know, but the above ground rodents, they will dig and chew off the crown and then you've got nothing.
Right. And you got nothing.
Yeah.
And then there was nothing.
Yeah, and then indeed there was. Now, if you have a tree or a shrub that, you know, is from a planting zone that's very close to yours, like, and I saw this more successfully in Alberta than we often need to do it here, although the colder areas here will do really well. Say you planted a edible chestnut tree. Okay, they're marginal in our area. You know, if you plant them where you are right down by the lake, chances are good it will survive quite well. If you plant it up in the Spa Hills or up in Glen Eden, it may not do as well, you know, in that area. It might get too cold for it. So if you have one of those trees or shrubs that is a zone or two more fragile than the zone that you're in. If you're looking at, you know, you've got something that's good to zone 4 and you're in zone 2, well, you know, what do you do about it? How do you hedge your bet with this? And what needs to happen almost invariably with these kind of trees and shrubs is you need to give them a couple of extra layers of insulation. And one of my favorite ways to do that is to take something like just a simple brown paper bag to start with. So you wrap the trunk of your tree first with something like brown paper, something fairly absorbent and relatively tough. Then on the outside of that, you can actually use fiberglass insulation if that's what you've got. And if you don't, you can, and the reason the brown paper works is it prevents the fiberglass from
getting in there.
Yeah, okay. It's only protection for the tree. Then you can use anything on top of that. Like you can use the insulation if you have it. If not, you can use old quilts or blankets that you've got from the thrift shop. You can use multiple layers of burlap with dry straw in between them. But wrap that tree or shrub so that it has an extra 1 to 2 inches of padding between it and the outside world. And that will protect it more from the temperature fluctuations than from the actual ambient temperature.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I did see a really interesting video where they were growing olives where olives shouldn't be growing, and every fall they would dig a trench
with something perhaps too fragile for our area, you know. Right. I would like to try that with something like maybe a miniature peach tree in Alberta.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Was it when we talked about it, I thought maybe we should do a peach tree, right?
Yeah, you know, and find a place where that would work. Yeah. So, you know, covering your trees up, tucking them in is phenomenal. I had a gardener friend that I met when I moved to Calgary in the 70s, and she had kept a black walnut tree alive in Calgary for over 1/4 century.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and you know, with the Chinook factor and the up and down temperatures, and that's just virtually unheard of in that area. So the extra layers of insulation allow the tree to settle into dormancy more slowly and come out of it more slowly. So if you get a sudden short cold snap, it isn't going to affect it as deeply. If you get a warm up and then it freezes again, the tree might not even notice because of the extra layers of insulation. Right. If you're in a really dry area and have been struggling with keeping cedars dry a lot, then wrap them, water them in well in the fall and wrap them. Take them and individually wrap them right around with burlap and tie them all up with string.
Right.
And this will allow them to hold a remarkable amount of moisture over the winter, and, you know, will prevent them from doing winter dry out and die back. I prefer that people plant for the zone that they're in so that, you know, you're not trying to keep cedars alive in Vernon. Because Vernon is
it just seems like a lot of extra.
To me, it does too, you know, like I really feel that, you know, if people landscape more with indigenous plants, they would save so much water and so much work around what they have to do to keep things from out of their zone alive. I
Right.
see people in northern Alberta trying to grow cut-leaf weeping birch, and I just want to weep along with the tree because it really doesn't have a hope.
Right. Well, one thing really sort of amazing happened in the garden 4 days ago. I got a whole feed of raspberries off my canes, right?
Oh, okay. Yes, you can often get a fall picking of
And
raspberries.
they were so delicious. Some of them they were a little too far gone because I didn't know they were there, right?
Yeah, when freeze up really starts to hit, I have a couple of friends who do raspberries as part of their market garden, and they put the notice out to all of us that the berries are freezing on the bushes. Come and pick as many as you want.
Oh, that's a great, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you basically take them home and pop them right in the freezer. They're pretty
Or,
much right there
yeah.
anyway. But they're certified organic raspberries, and free is free.
I didn't know that raspberries had got a second crop, so that was a new one for me.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, we for a long time really hybridized raspberries for excessive production in the springtime, and then the format was you then cut your canes down and we're done. But the reality is that raspberries will produce all year long. They get too hot in the height of summer
Right.
and they cease producing then, but they will come back again in the fall if you haven't cut them all down and chopped
Okay.
them off. And so making sure that they've got the water to be able
Yeah.
to do that. You'll know for next year.
No, that's a pleasant surprise. The other thing, I think Sarah already mentioned this in another show that I missed. I heard rumors that you took some berries off the asparagus and that you took them home. So could you quickly tell us what we
I,
do
I
about the seeds?
I
What do
think
we
they
do with them?
I think they're actually fermenting at. I thought we left them there. I'll look for them here if they're
Do,
not
do,
there.
do they do we collect them and plant? Can we plant them or
Yes, you can plant them, but what should happen is that the berries are red and fleshy,
yeah,
and you put them in water, and
yeah,
all of that will gather at the top and get very moldy,
yeah.
and in the bottom will be the dark black seeds. They'll be black, they'll be very heavy, and they'll sink to all your viable ones will be at the bottom.
Okay.
So you pour the water off, and then you lay the seeds out to dry. Once they're dry, label them, package them, and you can plant them next spring.
Okay. You don't plant them in the fall. You wait till the spring.
The reason I wait and plant carefully in the springtime is that when asparagus first comes up, that very first
Yeah.
year, it's very, very small, very thread-like. It,
Yeah.
it, it is almost unnoticeable.
So you couldn't find them if you did it in the fall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll just get completely lost if
Right.
you plant them in the fall. But if you plant them in the springtime, and you keep them, contained and in a container of some sort for pretty much that entire first garden year,
Yeah.
then in the fall you take those little babies and plant them, and the next year you will get something much more substantial from them, but it's usually the third year that you can eat them.
So if I've got this right, then you're suggesting we probably take the seeds, start them in the greenhouse in pots, grow them for the year,
Yeah.
and then the next spring put them out. Is that right?
No, in the fall.
In the fall. Okay, got it.
Grow them for that summer.
Right.
And
Okay,
then
got
in
it.
the fall, plant them in the ground.
Right.
in
Okay,
your
great.
garden.
That's really
Yeah.
good. I want more asparagus.
Oh,
No.
yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
that will take off like crazy because it's right from there.
Right.
It's
Yeah, it's already indigenous.
planted. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be a happy camper to be there.
Yeah.
And you also said something about we still have time to do transplanting strawberries as well, right? From the runners.
Yes. If we can get to that in the next week here, we can do that.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, we're going to want to do it before we hit that fourth quarter, but
Yeah.
we've got like 10 days between now and when that happens.
Okay, great.
So,
Okay.
yes, we can absolutely do that. And again, anything that you do like that, mulch it in, tuck it in really well.
Yeah.
you know, give it all the edge that you possibly can in that regard. Um,
Great.
oh, yeah. So, you know, unless you're actually moving a perennial around, don't over clean it out in at this time of year. Let all
Right.
that dead vegetation just kind of be there as insulation over the winter anyway.
Right.
Perennial roots generally do pretty well, but they have that vegetation die off and be there for a reason. You know, like we often think that we can second guess Mother
Right. So
Nature.
don't go pruning the roses or anything.
No, not at this time of year.
Oh,
Like
right. Okay.
leave them be.
Leave them alone.
Leave them alone. You know, like sometime in late May, early June is going to be plenty of time
Right.
for ripping apart dead stuff, and you know by then things will have hatched out and be well on their way.
So the big message today is really don't get carried away when putting your garden to bed. Do not leave bare soil exposed, right? Try
Yeah.
and put something on top, leave the leaves. If it's going to be stuff like squash and things like that where that gets moldy, you need to pull those vines out and put them in the compost, right?
Absolutely. And you
Don't
know,
rake the leaves, leave the leaves alone.
yeah.
Right?
And if you mulch over your garden beds, like if you put, you know, cardboard, newspaper, cardboard, a layer of straw over that, what you're going to do for weed control for yourself in the springtime is totally amazing. You know, you are going to not even give them an opportunity to get going.
So are you a follower of cover crops over the winter?
Oh, I think that they are like absolutely crucial for certain things.
Right.
There's a lady just outside of Lumbee in a place called Creighton Valley who had an amazing area down by her creek that had been badly scraped away by the previous people. They had built a bridge across the river, across the creek there, and they had, you know, they'd had all sorts of equipment on this nice level flat place. And she wanted it as a place where they could do a couple of little smaller gardens and, you know, have kind of a gathering area and putting it in her geodesic greenhouse. And we, after we brought in topsoil, we cover cropped it with radish, turnip, clover, and buckwheat.
Wow.
And for the first year, they just mowed it.
Right.
So that it never really went to seed. And anything that didn't get mowed close or anything that was kind of around the edges, we gathered more turnip and radish greens than you can shake a stick at. And she was really quite amazed to find out from a couple of European guests that in Europe, turnip and radish are often planted as like a really thick, groundbreaking cover crop and with no intention of pulling up the root and eating it. Everybody just eats the greens.
Right. Right.
Like if they either turn, you know, work the turnips back into the ground, or if they harvest them at all, they frequently feed them to the animals. You know, so you know, but it is so important to feed soil.
Right.
And you know, so the first 2 years, all they did was mow it. Well, this year they had a wedding in the family, and they used this area as kind of a large gathering place. The ceremony happened in the huge covered greenhouse, and then they were outside with all of the rest of it. And it's one of the nicest lawns I've ever been on. The clover has pretty much taken over, so it's pretty much endlessly mowed clover.
Wow.
It's soft, it's green, it's fragrant. And any places that they cut out and build like little flower beds or separate little gardens, the soil is made.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So I might be good to do a cover crop over my lawn, which is so non-nutritious, right? That might be a good idea.
I really think your lawn would be a prime subject for turning it into a clover lawn.
Right, I like that. So
Yeah.
can we just
The
plant
grass
more clover
so
on it?
struggles on that slope.
Yeah.
Yeah, just keep overseeding it with clover and mowing it. The grass just struggles on that slope.
Now, would it need to be scarified in order to plant the clover, or
No,
no?
no,
Just throw the seed on?
With some things you do have to, but not with clover.
No.
You could just do a mix of clover seed, a little bit of light soil for it to adhere with. And I'm not even sure you'd need much in the way of nutrient if you did that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds like a good idea.
We'll take a really close look at it when we're out there.
Okay, let's do that.
Doing other things, and I'll do some testing, and we'll see if we can figure out a planting rate that you can.
Well, I must say we do have some herbs in the lawn, and when you cut the lawn and you smell the herbs, it makes it gorgeous,
Oh, it is. It is thyme
Yeah.
in a lawn, having creeping thyme.
Yeah, it's creeping thyme. That's what it is. Yeah.
It's just divine. And you've got a fair patch of creeping thyme that we could, gather seeds from and just spread throughout the lawn.
That's a great idea. Yeah, we have 2 big patches of it. So yeah, so we'll do a lawn study. Maybe we can film that so people can have a sense of the sort of things we do with it.
Yeah, maybe we'll even do some more soil testing and see what you really need.
All righty.
Yeah.
So we're nearly at the end of the show. And so what's up next week?
Okay, well, next week we're going to be looking at, kind of the very last window that most of us are going to be able to spend outside, like once we get into November, the ground is freezing, the nights are too cold, and we're not going to be really doing much of anything outside in the garden. So next week's going to be kind of the last hurrah.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit about apples and pears and things to do with them over the winter. And
oh my God, the pears this year from my tree, they're like nectar from the gods.
Well, we will have to do some things around pears when we come out to film.
Well, you better hurry because I'm eating them pretty fast. They are so good. They are so good.
What variety do you have?
I don't know. They just go down really fast.
I'll take a look. Pears can be pretty definitive.
Just the first year where they don't have any lumps and bumps, I used advanced. I'll talk to you about, I can't even remember what it is. It's advanced technological rings. I put them around the trees. What's it called? I'll look it up. What is it, Michael? Gains. Yeah, I put gains around them rings that were, and it cleaned everything up. The trees just
nice. Yeah.
Amazing. I'm gonna put them around every fruit tree.
Yeah. No, there are so many really, really wonderful things you can do to give yourself good fruit production that does not involve poisoning anybody or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll talk about that when you come as well.
Yeah, it would be good to take a good look at apple and apple and pear trees and getting them ready for winter, and what do you do with the fruits of all that labor?
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. So we're at the top of the hour. It was a great show. Thank you ever so much. Same time, same place for at least the next 12 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So for the next 12 weeks, we'll be meeting at 1.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.